Lisa Ventura, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, it's great to be here today, Robby. Thank you for having me.
Likewise, it's a pleasure to have you here. Where are you joining us from?
Joining you from Worcester in the UK, in the Midlands. So,
all right.
nice neck of the woods here.
So I forgot who it was, but it was somebody from ISACA, at least.
I guess it will be Mike Hughes.
Mike Hughes.
Yes.
There you go. That was him.
Who I met in person for the first time at a Midlands big SASIC event a couple of weeks or so ago in Birmingham.
Cool. What's your relationship with ISACA then?
Mike's been really supportive for the last 2 or 3 years of everything that I've been doing in cyber. And I've talked to the UK chapter a couple of times about the topic we're going to be talking about today, which is all around avoiding overload and managing stress and burnout in cybersecurity.
Exactly. So cybersecurity and tech specialist, writer and speaker, mindset, well-being and mental health support coach, editor and founder of Cybersecurity Unity. You serve on multiple advisory boards. And there's so much more. So I'll just stop there so we don't run out of time. But you're a very busy body.
Absolutely. And I love doing what I do. And everything that I do, especially around Cybersecurity Unity, is all around fostering greater collaboration within the industry. So the more I think that we can get together and the more I think we can collaborate as an industry, the better. We all want the same thing. We all have the same goals to try to stop attacks, to try to help combat attacks. And I just think that if we can do that as an industry together, so much the better.
Right. Well, amen.
Yeah.
I see you here. You have a presentation for us.
I do indeed.
Today.
Absolutely. So I'm going to talk a little bit today around avoiding overload and managing stress and burnout in cybersecurity. Again, we just touched a little bit on who I am. I'm an award-winning cybersecurity specialist, writer and speaker. I'm the founder of Cybersecurity Unity, but I'm really passionate around some key topics and trends within the cybersecurity industry. And I'm a qualified mental health first aider. And my aim is to help and support those affected by stress, burnout, but also bullying and abuse in the industry, because that's something that I've had a lot of first-hand experience with, which in turn has then impacted on my mental health. So I do a lot of talks like this, and I do a lot of awareness raising around the importance of managing stress and burnout in the industry. So to start off with, I'm going to talk a little bit about how common stress and burnout is in InfoSec and cybersecurity. So according to a recent report from Times entitled The State of Mental Health in Cybersecurity, stress and burnout today is reaching epidemic levels, and it increased exponentially during the global COVID-19 pandemic, when we all had to transition to working from home really quickly, and we didn't have a lot of that social interaction with other people. So a few stats that I want to share. Nearly 1 in 3 security team members experience tremendous stress in InfoSec and cybersecurity, and this got, as I just mentioned, markedly worse during the pandemic. 27% of people in cybersecurity and InfoSec say that their mental health has declined over the past year. And 51% have been prescribed medication for their mental health. And in addition, 58% are currently taking that prescribed medication. And on top of that, 49% who responded to this particular report are currently also seeing a counsellor or therapist.
Wow.
So stress and burnout in cybersecurity is a huge problem. But I think despite this, most security leaders and others working in the industry are really passionate about what they do. I know I am. And the potential to make a real difference, even when their jobs are stressful. So I'm going to go into a few factors that are contributing to the increase of stress and burnout in our industry. And one is that there are constant and more sophisticated threats and attacks. And I think a lot of us know that, new threats and new things are emerging, practically every second. And we have to, as cybersecurity professionals, be on top of all these emerging threats, pretty much sort of 24 hours a day. And, that sort of constant being on top of it all and exposure can have an impact. And also the speed of innovation relating to threats is also increasing. There's also a lack of downtime. So many security professionals, especially CISOs, will feel the need that they have to be on 24/7, 24 hours a day, in case there's an attack, in case there's a threat, in case there's something that they need to deal with. So a lot of people in our industry are finding it difficult to have some much needed downtime. It's a low sense of personal worth and value and high degree of cynicism. So a lot of people in our industry, for example, sort of might feel that they don't, contribute a lot in terms of what they do. And a high sort of degree of cynicism from, say, from board level of, well, why do we need cybersecurity anyway? Why do we even need this? Until they get breached or attacked or something happens, and by which time it's too late. And even though it's 2023, I still see a lot of organisations that don't, place value on cybersecurity and have that degree of cynicism about it. Now, I will caveat that with saying that I see it more with smaller businesses, small businesses with SMEs in particular, as opposed to sort of much bigger enterprise level organisations. But even today, I still hear a lot about, but we're not going to get attacked. We're too small. Nobody's going to bother with us. And then they do. And then it's too late. Yeah. The solitary nature of remote working. So we are starting to transition a bit more now back to either the office full time or to more of a hybrid working pattern. And that brings around its own challenges with regard to cybersecurity and threat monitoring, etc. But during the pandemic, we all obviously had to transition to working from home all the time. Now, some people don't thrive very well in that environment. I myself, though, have been remote working since 2015 from before the pandemic, and I personally couldn't do an office environment 5 days a week unless I absolutely had to. I put that down to my being neurodiverse, so I have autism and was also diagnosed with ADHD earlier this year. And I find that I'm a lot more productive and can get a lot more done in my own space, which you can see behind me here, with my own environment than I can from being in an office space. So on that, I would say it's really about trying to, work with your employers to find the level of office work or remote working that works for you. Cybersecurity, as I mentioned earlier, is not widely accepted as a strategic function, and that's what I do a lot of in terms of awareness raising with Cybersecurity Unity, particularly with small businesses and SMEs, is that whole education and awareness piece around the importance of cybersecurity for their businesses, no matter what the size of it may be. As I mentioned earlier, workplace bullying and bullying and abuse in the wider community, particularly on social media platforms like Twitter and even LinkedIn, I've seen it on there as well. And this is something I have first-hand experience in, and my goodness, it does really impact your mental health and lead to the increase of stress and burnout when it happens. For another time, but I've got examples that would probably make you curl. It is a huge problem even today.
Before you move on there, Lisa, I just want to say, like, all these points you're bringing up, I see them every single day in my life, right? In my work life. That top point you have there, constant and more sophisticated, organized threats and attacks. Like, you never, a lot of the CISOs I talk to, they never feel like they reach a steady state. Or they may reach a steady state with one of their aspects of their portfolio or whatever, but like there's always something new. And then, the next point there, lack of downtime. There's always something new. You don't really get to take a break. You go home and your heart is still racing from work, and you sit down and maybe having dinner, and then you sit on the couch. Maybe you're watching TV, but you're thinking about something else. You're just always on. Yeah. And if you combine that with the fact that a lot of your coworkers don't necessarily appreciate you, right? A lot of CISOs are people that have to say no and slow other projects down, and it's a very unforgiving job, and nobody's going to get the Employee of the Year trophy. Usually, if you do your job, nothing happens, right?
this is it. And as I said, there's a lot of cynicism from boards or from senior teams of, especially with those smaller organisations, of why do we even need to look at this? I think there's a lot of progress being made, though, through awareness raising and cyber awareness training, etc. There is a lot of awareness out there, but still I think there's quite a high degree of cynicism that needs to be overcome. So a few more factors on this slide. Skill shortage. I'm sure many of us listening today will know that the cybersecurity and InfoSec industry does have quite a large skill shortage, and there is a cyber skills gap, and we're always looking to bring more people into the industry. Not just the younger generations, which is of course hugely important, but looking at career transitioners, getting more women into cybersecurity, getting those the neurodiverse into the industry, because a lot of studies show that those that are neurodiverse are really well suited to careers in InfoSec and cybersecurity, and also those from underrepresented and ethnic minority groups. So I think there's a lot of work being done there to encourage more people to take up a career in the industry. Increasing regulations. Again, things change all the time. I know that the UK Cybersecurity Council, for example, are working on a big programme around standards and ethics, and also that whole piece around professionalising the industry. So there's a lot that's going on there in terms of new regulations. So AI at the moment, there's a lot of conversations going on about AI and the use of ChatGPT, and looking at regulating this somehow and what this all means for our industry. Having to secure too much data in too many places, and really keeping track of what data is where and what function that data serves, etc. That can also lead to a big increase of stress and burnout. Threats of losing your job, or even being disciplined if there is a cyber attack or a breach. I'm sure we may have heard the Uber case, where the ex-CISO of Uber actually went to jail. I mean, that was quite a specific thing, but it's a very extreme case. But that could contribute to a little bit of stress and burnout. And the threat of losing your job as well. I'm sure many people listening today will have heard of so many layoffs in so many different tech companies and so on that have been going on. So that threat, if it's there, especially with the cost of living crisis the way it is at the moment, will lead to some exponential stress and burnout. It's also been shown that it's very rare for people in cybersecurity to seek professional help when they're feeling overwhelmed. A lot of people in their organisations feel like that they're a little bit of an island, that they might be the only one that's responsible for the cybersecurity function, especially if it is a smaller organisation. But that's where I think communities, especially with what I do with Cybersecurity Unity, and there's a lot of really good communities on platforms like Twitter, on Mastodon, Blue Sky at the moment as well, and LinkedIn. And there were always others within our industry who would be more than happy to help, and just somebody to sort of share something with, get a sense test on things. I think that's really important as well. So I'll move on a little bit to how mental health issues might manifest themselves. And poor mental health might come about by things like, bouts of insomnia. You might be worrying so much about what's going on at the office, or what's going on at work, that you might find it difficult to get any decent stretches of sleep. A decline in performance. So where you might have been, really enthusiastic and really, really passionate when you first, started, with the advent of, more threats, less budget, less resources, etc., it can be really easy to sort of slide down in terms of what your true capabilities really are. Increasing use of drugs or alcohol to cope when things get really tough. That's been seen as well in our industry. Over or under eating, so having a poor appetite or overeating, or even eating a lot of the wrong things, a lot of junk food, things like that can also manifest itself. Taking more, sick days and just having that sort of overwhelming sense of dread of having to sort of go into work or be in that environment. Withdraw from activities that you once enjoyed. So I can talk a little bit about my own perspective on this. I can tell when my own mental health levels aren't great because I don't feel like doing things that I really enjoy. So, for example, I love doing karate and martial arts, and I love doing things like Tai Chi and yoga and exercising in my home gym here as well. And when my mental health's starting to take that bit of a dip, I find it really difficult to get the motivation to do any of those activities. And I also notice on the weekends as well, where I would love sort of going out and perhaps spending some time with friends or doing some bullet journaling or things like that. I just then want to just lie on the settee and watch TV, and that's all I want to do. So those are the points where I try to sort of, look at myself and go, yeah, things are just taking a little bit of a dip, and then and I'll come on to some things that work for me on some of the slides shortly. Loss of motivation, as I just mentioned. I just don't really feel like doing all those activities and things, and I find it sort of difficult to get going and get into what I'm doing with my work. Physical and mental exhaustion. So I can definitely talk from my own experience on this. Particularly with my ADHD, my brain would just go into complete shutdown mode. And then with that, I'll also feel as if I just want to lie on the sofa and not do anything. And I try to just go with it when it gets, like that, and try my best to sort of get through the week. But then if I'm really feeling like that, I don't see it as a waste of time of having that downtime on the sofa just to try and get up to speed again. And if left unchecked with a lot of this, cybersecurity and InfoSec professionals can also be at risk of depression and anxiety disorders. So recognising the signs of burnout, which is a reaction to prolonged or chronic job stress, and it can often be categorised by these three main things. So complete and utter physical and mental exhaustion, which I just talked about in the last slide. Cynicism and having less identification with your job. So feeling like you're really, not making a difference, that you don't matter with what you're doing, that they could sort of manage without what you do and without you. That could also be another sign that could lead to burnout. Feelings of reduced professional ability. So this is a bit where imposter syndrome can come in as well. You might be feeling, what am I doing here? Why have they brought, me into this? I'm not good at my job. I'm not good at anything. So that can be another area as well. And if you find yourself identifying with a lot of what I'm talking about, you may be at risk of burnout. So recognising as well some of the signs of stress. So being irritable, aggressive, impatient, or just generally wound up can be a sign. Feelings overburdened, that everybody's putting everything onto you and you don't know which bit to look at first. Being very anxious or nervous or afraid, but not really having any sort of tangible reason for feeling like that. Feeling like your thoughts are racing and you can't switch off. Now, as somebody that's been diagnosed with ADHD, I describe this as having almost like 1,000,001 different internet browser tabs open, and they're all vying for my attention all the time, and I just cannot switch off from it, and I don't know which browser tab to address first. So that's something I can definitely identify with. Unable to enjoy yourself. So again, I can talk about that from my own experience. If I do arrange to go out with friends or to do something, when I'm there, I just have this overwhelming sense of I'm just not enjoying what I'm doing, even though I used to enjoy that activity. Feeling sort of generally depressed, and quite sort of uninterested in life. And I've definitely had periods of time where I've gone through both of those. Like you've lost your sense of humour. Now, part of my autistic side is that I actually struggle sometimes to understand if something that's been said is funny or if there is a joke in it or so on. So for me, I'm always, sort of masking and looking at making sure that, is that funny? Is that not funny, etc. But you might feel that you've lost your sense of humour. A sense of dread, as if the worst thing in the world is going to happen, and I've been through that as well. Every little niggle or thing, I automatically assume it's the worst, and to worrying generally if I can't seem to pick up from a bout of burnout as quickly as I usually do. Feeling neglected or lonely, again, even when there's no reason sort of for it. Again, I can talk from my own perspective. I've got my husband, I've got some amazing friends, I've got a dog who's the most amazing therapist ever. I've got a community on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. I've actually got people that I know that day or night I can just talk to. I've got a friend in California. I've talked to my friend in California in the middle of the night. For me, it's daytime for her. I've got people in Australia, Singapore, India. 24 hours a day, I've got a community that I know I can reach out to. Yet I know that there are times that I still feel as if I'm neglected or lonely for no reason. And some people who experience severe stress can also sometimes have suicidal feelings. And I'm going to talk a little bit as well about post-traumatic stress disorder, because it's not always linked to just those that are soldiers in wars or go through seeing that kind of level of trauma. In extreme situations, cybersecurity professionals can indeed develop it. And although it's not like, as I said earlier, the PTSD that veterans suffer from, it's still extremely debilitating. And many are first-hand witnesses to cyber attacks that leave lasting damages to the organisations that they help protect, and it can manifest itself into their work in the future as a reminder of the worst that could happen. And they might have flashbacks to that cyber attack happening, which will impact their well-being and mental health even further. And panic can set in when security professionals can see signs that remind them of past incidents, and that'll manifest as PTSD. And it's best to deal with these issues and stress before they become lasting problems, because they could keep InfoSec and cybersecurity professionals from doing their best work. So I would say if you feel a lot of what I've just been talking about, see if you can get some counselling or speak to a therapist. There's absolutely no shame in doing that. I've done that. I've had an amazing counsellor and had some therapy sessions. And I also had EMDR treatment to help me deal with a lot of the abuse and trauma that I'd had in my lifetime. And it may not work for you, but it absolutely worked for me. And it's something that I would definitely recommend that you look at doing. So I'm going to go into a few tips to try to help combat stress and burnout. Now, again, I'll caveat this that they are tips. They may or may not work for you. A lot of it has worked for myself. But I'll start off with, if you're feeling burnt out or stressed, talk to your colleagues and your family members or friends. In the 1980s, there was an advertising campaign for British Telecom, which had the line of, it's good to talk. And it really is, just getting those thoughts, out there and talking to others about what you're going through and what you're feeling can be really beneficial. This is something that I actually do quite regularly, which is I always carry out what I call an emotional needs audit to identify which of your needs are not being met at work. And then I look to set positive and achievable goals to help those needs be met. And I have regular catch-ups with people. I talk to them about things that challenges that I have and things that perhaps I could look at doing better, because I'm always learning and I'm always looking for new things and new ways of doing things. And I think that a lot of us in cybersecurity and InfoSec can relate to that. Use wellbeing related apps. So I have a lot of apps on my phone that I use. I have Headspace and some meditation apps. I have one called Calm. And there is actually one called the Zensory, which I absolutely recommend, which has been put together specifically for those in the cybersecurity industry and InfoSec industry. So I would definitely recommend having a look at a few of those and trying different ones. You might get one that doesn't work, but another one will. So look at ones that work for you. Know your energy patterns and plan your work accordingly. So doing tasks that require more brain power, for example, when you feel that you're most energetic, and perhaps some easier admin related tasks when you're feeling a bit low on energy. So for example, I'm a morning person, so doing this at the time that we're recording it now, it's to 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning for me, that's my best time to do things like this. I'm not so great in the evenings, so I try not to do too much past the hours of 5 to 5:30, unless I really have to, and I have to do a call to fit in with the United States or a different time zone or so on. But I know that I'm far much better in the mornings. I'm a morning person, so I work accordingly to make the most of that. Avoid, if you can, turning to drugs and alcohol and excessive overeating, etc. Easier said than done, but it's something, again, that's really worked for me, is just sort of being a bit, mindful of that. We all love a drink after work or to celebrate or whatever. It's very sort of much part of the social fabric, of life. But I would always say just keep an eye that it doesn't go sort of too much unchecked. Taking regular physical exercise. As I mentioned earlier, I love martial arts and karate. I have I set up a home gym here with a treadmill, cross trainer, bike, etc. And I also have my dog, so I have regular walks with my dog as well. And that gets me out into the fresh air. So I know that without her, I probably wouldn't do that. So having her helps me get out into the fresh air and have that sort of much needed downtime. So I'm going to share some tips now around combating stress and burnout in the workplace. And again, I'll caveat this by saying it's what works for me. I'm hoping that some of these tips might work for you as well. So, try not to take things too personally or take on too much, because you can only do so much. Use reframing, so things like challenging assumptions, looking for learning opportunities, and asking what's good about situations to try and rationalize a situation that may occur. So I always say try to stand back from the challenge or the problem and question whether it's as bad as it first appears. Relaxation techniques, so 7-11 breathing, muscle tension, relaxation and guided visualization may also help. And mindfulness, so during your workday, use short mindfulness exercises. Take regular breaks if you can. And you know what, I'm going to put my hands up to this one. I can be pretty bad about getting to sort of lunchtime, early afternoon. Oh, I've not stopped yet, or I haven't had a lunch break yet. So I try really, really hard to make sure that I stop, I take those regular breaks, that I eat mindfully. And as somebody that's got ADHD, this is really, really difficult for me to try to focus on one task at a time and to try to be present and pay attention. And it's something that I work on all day, every day. And also I try to be, mindful in communications and make time for really important self-reflection. A few more tips as well. So when dealing with challenging communicators, and goodness me, I've had so many of these in my career, and I've also had to deal a lot with narcissists in the workplace, which is a whole other separate talk and discussion, believe me. When dealing with these challenging communicators, it's easy to say, but try to remain, calm and focused and bring them back to the subject at hand. Ask them to clarify what they mean, or tell them, and tell them your understanding of what they said, because focusing on the facts and not emotions can help keep both parties composed. And the best way as well, I found, to deal with passive aggressive behaviour in the workplace is to try to understand from the other person's sort of point of view that behaviour, and try to build a positive relationship with the person. And being kind, communicative and non-threatening can help people like this feel more relaxed. Now, there are some personality types that this may just not work with. I mentioned narcissists in the workplace, and I'm sure we've all come across them, where they are always right. They are never wrong about anything. And those type of personalities are really, really difficult to deal with. And I actually do a whole other talk on that specific personality type in the workplace. A few more tips about managing your mental health at work. Look at your working environment. So, are your working hours, do they work for you? Time off and out, and the workplace culture. And don't be afraid to have those discussions with HR and with your line managers to try to create that ideal working environment and working pattern that works for you. People as well often feel measured by where they fit in an ever-increasing hierarchy, and not on their potential or value that they add to the company. So know that you do add tremendous value in everything that you do. Social events and team bonding events. Now, these don't work for everyone. Because I'm autistic and have ADHD, I actually really struggle with doing team building days and social days, and I have to make sure I build much needed downtime after I do them. But if you're, quite an extroverted personality and you like socializing, etc., these can be really, really beneficial. Always remember that times of uncertainty at work can cause immense pressure on individuals. So if somebody is, a bit snappy or aggressive, try not to take it too personally. And as I said earlier, always look at the facts rather than get overly emotional. Cutting out negative behaviours. So workplaces that tolerate bullying or harassment will experience inefficiency, high staff turnover. And again, I've been in organisations where I've left specifically because they wouldn't deal with bullying individuals in the workplace, and will cause poor relationships within teams at all levels. Leave space between meetings. So this is something that I do regularly, and I always make sure that because I work remotely, the majority of my meetings are always virtual ones on Teams, Zoom or other platforms. And I always make sure, if at all possible, to leave some space in between those calls to process the previous calls, get any notes and actions and things like that up to date, and also just allow me that bit of downtime. When I had the UK Cybersecurity Association a couple of years ago, which I decided to close down, I was on call after call after call without getting any focused work done at all. And then I was catching up on evenings and weekends and not getting any downtime. So I've learned from that experience now, and I always try to leave adequate space in between meetings. And this now relates to what you can see on this screen, which is the cover of a book by Brian Tracy. And the book is called Eat That Frog, Get More of the Important Things Done Today. And if you're doing something awkward or something that you really, really don't want to do, or you're dreading doing, I always get it done first thing, get it out of the way. In other words, I try to, not literally, but eat that frog, get that awkward thing, that thing I really am dreading doing, done and out of the way, and then everything else just follows and flows really nicely. A few more tips here on managing your mental health at work. In open plan offices, I would really recommend that there's some quiet rooms or hot desking quiet areas that offer more privacy set aside. And this is really important to somebody like me who's neurodiverse, who can't cope with that sensory overload in an office of phones ringing and being interrupted and general noise level, etc. I have invested in some noise cancelling earphones if I'm ever in that kind of environment, and that's something that I would definitely recommend. But then equally, I've been told off for having headphones on, so it's like I can't win. But I would definitely recommend having those quiet areas. If nothing else, for you to just go in and be able to decompress if you've just had perhaps a particularly challenging or stressful call, or you just need that quiet space. It's so important to have that. Helping employees to understand the important role that they play towards an organisation's mission and vision. Involve them as much as possible and communicate that as much as possible. Creating that organisational culture of openness and communication is crucial to addressing sort of insecurity that your team might feel. Unhealthily high stress work environments do not have to be an inevitability of a cybersecurity workplace. There's so much that you can do to foster that open environment that's really important. Cultural change needs to happen at board level and cascade down by people who want to change it and understand it fully. And it is difficult to instill that cultural change and those changes, particularly around cybersecurity at board level. But in my experience, if that can be achieved, it'll then cascade down throughout the whole organisation. And that's where I think a really good cybersecurity awareness training programme can come into play. If the board can get, for want of a phrase, on board with that, it'll make all the difference. Demonstrate that every employee is valued. I can't stress that enough. And HR teams need to look at providing resources that invest in the well-being of cybersecurity staff, but not just cybersecurity staff, but all of their staff. So here's just a few of my tips in terms of managing your mental health generally. Make time for things outside work that you enjoy. Take regular breaks, no matter how busy you get during the day. So I talked a little bit about how important that is. And get up and go to bed at the same times every day, because that'll help you to maintain a routine. I know that that's something that I do, and that's really helped me immensely. But again, being an autistic person, I thrive on routine and the same things happening at the same times every day. Make time for family and friends. So I always make sure that my husband and I have proper time together where we don't talk about work, especially in the evenings. And you'll often find us, browsing YouTube. We'll be looking at funny videos or watching films on our home cinema system. And at the weekends, I always organise catch-ups with my friends for some downtime as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about bullying and abuse in InfoSec and in cybersecurity, because it's one of the biggest things that impacts mental health in our industry. And there are 3 different types of bullying and abuse. So abuse and bullying in the workplace, and that's something that I've had a lot of first-hand experience of, as I have of social media and online bullying and abuse that's viewed publicly. I'm sure you have heard a lot about Twitter pile-ons, as they're called in our industry, and bullying and abuse via DMs, emails and private messages, and bullying and abuse in person. And it is not acceptable under any circumstances, and I believe it absolutely has to stop. There's no excuse for it. And so, having been a victim and now a survivor of all these kinds of abuse, I've actually founded a small community in our industry called All Together Now that aims to provide support and resources. So, example, if somebody's going through a situation like that, they can reach out via the community, and as I'm a trained mental health first aider, and we provide those listening resources, that space for somebody to get a sense check of a situation, and then we can also signpost to other organisations that can help those individuals further. So that's just a little bit of information about it. And I've got a group of people within our community who are all there and willing to be able to help others. And we have a couple of taglines that we're stronger together. And to coin the phrase from the Bill and Ted films some years ago, be excellent to each other. Kindness goes a long way. There's no reason for bullying and abuse in our industry. I'll put a few bits of further reading and resources here. So Crest in the UK, for example, have highlighted in a report the problems of stress and burnout in our industry. And there's a few other organisations here as well. So Action for Happiness, Headspace Mind, and also the NHS in the UK has got a whole section about understanding stress and burnout. Obviously, if there's any questions or anything that you want to talk about, hints, tips and suggestions there, and some ways you can get in touch with me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram, and on my websites, and email if you have any questions. So thank you for listening to my presentation today, and I hope to see a lot more of you in the future. So thank you very much, Robby, for having me on this podcast today.
Thank you very much, Lisa. My neck hurts. I've been like a bobblehead. Just you had so many great points, and they always say know thyself, right? In a network defender context, like know your network, and then the bad guys know your network better than you do. But how well do we know ourselves? Because if one thing is know your network, but if you don't know yourself, then you're not going to be there, maybe,
Absolutely. And as I mentioned earlier, this is where I do a separate talk on the whole thing around narcissists in the workplace, because they just don't know themselves. They think they're always right. They think that they are the authority on everything, and they think they've got the right to bulldoze over everybody. And I believe that there's a huge link as well between narcissists in the work. They're often the bullies. They are absolutely, I can really see it now as crystal clear. Now I've learnt about the narcissistic personality type, which came about through a family situation, but I can see that type now in the workplace, and 9 times out of 10, bullies are also usually very narcissistic personalities as well, and very damaging, very damaging.
Of course, and you had a point there saying that maybe I misunderstood, but if you're in the receiving end of a bullying context, just maybe you try to put yourselves in their shoes or the other people, because they also, in my experience, the people that are the biggest bullies and have the meanest people, they don't, number one, they don't know it themselves, they don't really have that much self insight, and number two, it's probably because they're the way they were raised. So and one thing I've also noticed about cybersecurity people is they're probably the most empathetic group of people, right? Smart, educated, lots of feelings. So if you combine those, then we can maybe,
One thing from my side, which in terms of being autistic and ADHD, I actually feel things quite intensely. Even just a piece of music, I can really just feel it. It's really strange to explain, but I think you've hit the nail on the head there, because there are a lot of neurodiverse individuals in cybersecurity, and I think many of them will have that almost extreme sort of with feelings as well.
And as a part of my warm up for this podcast, I was listening to some podcasts about the ADHD and neurodiversity was what the podcast was called. I've always been very busy. I'm always running back and forth. Usually one of the louder people in the room and stuff. But I also learned that they say you have autism or ADHD. It's a scale, right? So our whole lives we've been told that all of us are different and stuff. But society does try to put us all in one bubble. We're all supposed to be that one person, but none of us are that person.
No.
So again, back to the emotional audit thing. I'm going to use some part of my summer just to be okay, because here's where I am different than other people, and this is where I can, like you said, make a plan or some sort of work it into your schedule for you to do things in a different way than everybody else, just to be at the end of the day the best person you can be and be the best for everybody around you.
And it's difficult because, again, being autistic, I hate change. I don't like change of any description, and I think it takes me longer than the average person to form new habits and new ways of doing things because of that. And I can find myself going into sort of old habits or old ways. So even just last week, there was one day, oh my goodness, I've got so many calls in one day. Why did I do that? It's little things like that. I have to work really hard, probably harder at them, to make sure that I don't slip back into those old ways and old habits.
Well, last thing I want to say is the bullying tip. It surprises me so much when I go on LinkedIn. I look at LinkedIn more than I look at any of the other app because it's like my news app, right?
Yeah.
But the amount of people that just like start fighting and bullying each other on LinkedIn, it just like goes back to what they taught us as kids. If you don't have nice to say, don't say anything.
Yeah, and I swear we've got a lot of keyboard warriors with the advent of social media, and I guarantee that a lot of what they will say on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on all these other platforms, I guarantee they would not say a lot of it to somebody's face.
I know.
It's bizarre.
Yeah, it's really strange that people act so differently online than they do in person. Because I know a lot of those people that say these things, and I'm like, you would never say that to anybody. Like, but again, know thyself, right?
Yeah.
And if you're maybe it's enough just hearing that, hey, be nicer on social media, but maybe it's also worth it, to go deep into, okay, why am I doing that? And like address that underlying issue.
Absolutely.
Well, we all have something to work with. So, Lisa, number one, I really, 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 from the bottom of my heart, appreciate you sharing all your experience and your tips with us today. I hope people listening to this actually like take it to heart and maybe, try to make something out of it. I know I'm going to. I want to have you back on and talk about a lot of the other topics. We discussed so many things today, like neurodiversity in the workplace. Because how can we get the best out of the people that we have, right? And maybe you're a CISO or a leader listening to this episode, and you have a large team, right? You shouldn't be. Perhaps you shouldn't be treating all your team members the same because they're all different, right? So just tips and tricks for leaders, or about how to manage that. So I'd love to have you back on. It's been a great pleasure learning from you today. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd love to come back, Robbie. It's been great. Really enjoyed it.
And we hope we see you in Norway too later this year.
I hope so.
You're invited. So
as soon as I can get the time. Because I obviously have a dog and one thing and another here. But yes, I have a really good friend in Norway, and I've always wanted to go to Norway and that neck of the woods. So as soon as I get some time,
cool. We'll take that offline, and in the meantime, we'll hopefully plan another podcast episode.
Great.
Lisa, thank you so much for everything, and
thank you, Robby.
Will see you soon.
Thank you.